Hello, everyone. This is Andy Duncan with Boardwalk Tech. Welcome to the May 2nd, 2018 Learn How to Use Blockchain Today in Your Supply Chain. Today, I'm joined by Laura Cicerne, who will be attending shortly, and also JB Coopy, our VP of Marketing at Boardwalk. Hello, JB.
Hello, Andy. Hello, everybody.
Good. Thank you. So today, we'd like to talk about some various issues around blockchain with specific use cases around where blockchain can be used in the supply chain. So we're going to do a brief overview of blockchain and what blockchain really is all about. We're also going to show you some use cases about specific customers, and then JB's going to do a demo and show you a live demo of blockchain applications that are running that Boardwalk has built. So first of all, who is Boardwalk? Well, Boardwalk was founded in 2005. We're based in Cupertino, California, and also in Mumbai, India. We have been developing patented blockchain applications for now almost 14 years. We actually were the company that came out with the first digital ledger that was delivered to Nokia in 2007. And digital ledger is, of course, the core of what a blockchain application is all about. We're proud to be able to talk about the fact that we have 23 of the Fortune 500 today as customers utilizing the Boardwalk blockchain in various different use cases from finance, HR, but also quite heavily in the supply chain. So why is blockchain important in the supply chain? And I think a little bit of history here is important to discuss. First of all, you know, blockchain has really kind of come into its own, or at least started to be understood by the market based upon the success of the crypto or cyber currency known as Bitcoin. And Bitcoin uses a digital ledger to store and manage the exchange of this particular asset known as a Bitcoin. As people started to recognize the value of the method of being able to store and manage these Bitcoins in a digital ledger, there started to become use cases popping up around utilizing this particular method of managing data known as a digital ledger in different areas of the enterprise. As this started to kind of boil, if you will, in kind of 2016 and 2017, there were some pretty important statements that came out. One from Ginny Rometty last year at her user conference, which she's the CEO of IBM, where she basically stood on stage and said that IBM was going to bet the company on three technologies going forward: cloud, AI, and blockchain. And shortly thereafter, we had McKinsey come out with a statement that talked about the fact that blockchain was the single most important technology in our lifetime, second only to the internet itself. So people are starting to get very energized around blockchain and the potential for blockchain. At Boardwalk, where we really see the value and the potential is in creating what I would call as a protocol for the method of exchanging digital information, especially in the enterprise, and that would be inter and intra exchange of data. Never before has there been a mechanism or a protocol for moving information. We certainly have old EDI networks, which is fine, very transactional, but most of the information that is being moved around, especially when you have multi-parties involved, is someone is attaching a spreadsheet to an email and emailing that. And we all know that the minute that you do that, you totally lose control over what's happened with regard to the information. Blockchain and the digital ledger has the opportunity to create a protocol or be the protocol for the exchange of enterprise information, which gets us to this next level of digital management of information. So some of the kind of barriers to blockchain adoption, at least currently that are sitting out there, is that all parties need to invest. So we see a lot of companies out there that are talking about, oh, you know, you got to pay $10,000 a month to join this or join that. And this is certainly a barrier and one that we're concerned about. We also see that, you know, connecting to the blockchain is just the tip of the iceberg, and that the blockchain really is all about not only the participants, not only about the protocol of an environment to be able to exchange data, but the agreement on what type of information is going to be exchanged. And it means that the data is the key to any type of application. Certainly, it's the key to blockchain. And then currently, building blockchain applications is pretty tedious. There's a couple of open source platforms that are out there like Ethereum or Hyperledger. And the minute that you want to go and start to build a blockchain application, you got to start thinking about the data model and the user interfaces and all of the normal stuff that comes with, you know, kind of ginning up an application from scratch. And it's costly and it's complicated. And we're certainly seeing a lot of kind of deployments in the $1 million range in order to kind of get your first, you know, blockchain application up and running. And we think that that's a ridiculous cost and actually way out of line from what it should be. So why is blockchain important? Well, first of all, as part of your journey to create kind of a digital transformation, efficiency is extremely important. And the ability to quickly digitize, if you will, the way in which you're moving this information certainly can be seen and valued in a Boardwalk or in a blockchain environment. The second thing is increasing the speed by which you're moving information. And to me, this is one of the most critical. We're going to show a use case where we were able to move a planning cycle for an apparel manufacturer from 6 weeks to 2 weeks. And that was a significant, not only did it provide a significant ROI, but it really improved the value of the information exchange and actually showed an increase in sales, an increase in margin, and a reduction in inventory, all things that we're interested in. So blockchain can improve the speed by which we're exchanging data. Reducing fraud, of course, is very important. All of the blockchain transactions sitting on a digital ledger are tamper-proof. And again, this is part of that, having that protocol that says we are the protocol for the secure storage and transmission of information. Certainly freeing up capital is very important, because if you can get to that process efficiency and you can start doing things like reduce inventory by 1.8%, now we're talking about real dollars. And then, of course, building stronger relationships is that we've got several customers that are running supply chain where they've got component manufacturers or contract manufacturers. And the fact that you've got this secure ability to transact in information exchange with an audit trail that says, no, Mr. Component Manufacturer, you committed to 1 million units at $1.35 on May 23rd, and I'm going to hold you to that, is a real key about having all the data in a digital ledger in blockchain. And not that we're trying to become the police, but if you can have this audit trail that everyone can see and everyone can get to and say, no, this is what we agreed, now you've eliminated a lot of the arguing, if you will, about whose data is right and what was committed and what wasn't committed, because on the digital ledger, it is there, it is irrefutable, this is what you committed, this is the date and the time, this is who you are. So one of the issues around blockchain is what type of blockchains are out there. There's, in the world of moving Bitcoins around, what would be called a fully distributed blockchain environment. And this is effectively where no one owns the environment. Everyone has a copy of everything that has happened. And this has kind of been the purest or traditional way in which blockchain environments are set up and established. What we think, and what also Gartner talks about, is that going forward, and specifically for the enterprise, the major types of blockchain implementations that we're going to see are what we call private permissioned blockchain environments. And this is important because, especially with our customers today at Boardwalk, they don't want information out in the wide open. They don't want everybody to necessarily be able to see every single transaction. And there is a control element that needs to be deployed here as an enterprise that says, I want to know who I'm trading with. I want to approve that particular person to be on my blockchain environment. I want to be able to make sure that I know my customer, know my trading partner. I also want to be able to make it easy for both my internal and external users to be able to sign up. I don't want them to have to go to some service and have to pay $10,000 a month just to get on the blockchain. I want to be able to say, here is the application that we're going to use to be able to exchange this information. The third thing is work in process, or WIP, is certainly very important. Many times in the wide open blockchain, you don't have a record or a specific trail, if you will, of what would be called work in process, where people might be doing a lot of work behind the scenes and then submit it to the blockchain. Well, a lot of the work behind the scenes is important to have on the digital ledger and have a history of that. Think of provenance with regard to food and wanting to track where did that grapefruit come from. If you don't have all of the transactions in a single place, including the work in process, then you really don't have the ability to track back and say, where did this grapefruit come from? The last piece of this that I would say is that one of the biggest issues around blockchain and one of the biggest values is something that's called smart contract. So think of an environment where I've been talking about blockchain as a protocol that says that we now have all of the data in one place. I now have a complete historical record of all transactions that have occurred between me and all of the people that I am exchanging data with on my private permission blockchain. Now that I've got all the data, I've got a protocol, I've got all the information that's securely set in the digital ledger, it's great to be able to have the auditability, but what do I do as a next step? And as a next step, what I want to do is do something called smart contract. A smart contract is kind of a goofy name. We didn't come up with it, but it's effectively a set of code that's written, if-then statement that says, if this happens, go do that. So let me give you a great example of smart contract code that can be loaded up and written into a private permission blockchain environment. And that would be for something like invoice, purchase order, matching, and reconciliation. So let's say that I'm getting 1,000 invoices in a day. And let's say that both the purchase order and the ship notice and the invoice are all resident on the digital ledger. Well, I can then take that, which we've done, by the way, at Boardwalk, and we write code that says, let's do an automatic matching of the ship notice and the purchase order and the invoice. And if when the invoice comes in, the ship notice is there and validated, the purchase order matches, the supplier matches, the amount matches, the dates match, everything matches, then go ahead and generate a message to the SAP system electronically that says, go ahead and pay this vendor electronically because the invoice and the purchase order and the ship notice all match. Well, what have we just done? not only have we just eliminated the potential of having 500 people sitting at a business process outsourcer in India that are chasing 1,000 invoices a day and trying to match them up, but we have greatly streamlined the operation of being able to match the purchase order and the ship notice and the invoice because all of the information is resident sitting on the digital ledger. Take that a next step and think about things like managing your suppliers utilizing a digital ledger exchange of data. Think about being an insurance company where you can automate the workflow around the renewal of a policy with all of the multi-parties involved. There are just, you can almost, you can hardly count the areas of value that can be created once you have the data on the digital ledger, it's secure and it's validated. So let's talk about some different kind of ROI examples. Earlier I talked about a particular apparel manufacturer. In the apparel industry, they do what's called seasonal planning, and they got to plan 4 times a year. And it's the whole thing of how many pink sweaters do I need to manufacture that I think I can sell in Florida with the blue buttons for the autumn season. And you think about a company that has, hundreds of thousands of SKUs and lots of product managers, lots of manufacturers, lots of component manufacturers, lots of contract manufacturers, and you're trying to figure out pricing, you're trying to figure out all of this stuff. It takes a long time to be able to kind of come to a conclusion on how many pink sweaters you're going to manufacture and deliver to Florida versus to, call it New York or Portland with those particular attributes. And so if you can get everybody on the same page on a digital ledger utilizing a blockchain application and start to exchange this information seamlessly in a digital environment, and you start to write smart contract code against this, now we're starting to be able to get to real value. Think about eliminating all of the spreadsheet processes that you've got in your company. Think about all those spreadsheets that get emailed around and everybody is confused and arguing about, well, who made the change to cell number M21 and how did we ever get to that number? Where in a world of blockchain, while you still could use a spreadsheet as the user interface and exchange those, you've got a complete historical record to be able to go back with one click to say, this is how we got to that number in cell M21. So based upon that, we have ROI examples utilizing the Boardwalk blockchain, where just taking a look at, call it a $200 million company with 25 process users, that we were able to save in the first application that was delivered on the Boardwalk blockchain, $650,000. The ROI was tremendous, and this is basically a hard ROI here. The soft ROI, as I like to talk about it, which would be what is the strategic value of being able to reduce a 6-week process down to 2 weeks. And I would say that the soft ROI is probably more or greater than the hard ROI of $650,000, because now you can start to negotiate with your suppliers a better price because you're earlier than the competition. You're reducing risk of having the right product at the right place at the right time. You're able to get better pricing. You're able to get much better visibility into what's going on. And all of this has to do with the speed by which you can exchange the information and having these secure, validated transactions all in one place that everyone can see on the digital ledger. So the Boardwalk Enterprise Blockchain Service is think of it as a blockchain stack. And Boardwalk provides not only the ability to build the applications that allow you to be able to move this information between you and other parties, But also we have a model and smart contract designer so that you can very easily leverage writing that smart contract code to help to automate the exchange and of the information that's on the digital ledger. We have a full permissioned data and access control environment that allows you to be able to know exactly who is communicating with the digital ledger and how that information is actually being exchanged. We also have a full integration framework that allows you to be able to integrate into your existing transactional systems of record. So if you're running SAP or Salesforce.com or Oracle, doesn't matter, you can actually move data seamlessly in and out of those systems of record and bring that data into the Boardwalk blockchain environment so that now you can do things like line up inventory on an aggregated basis from 7 different depots around the world to give you visibility on exactly how many SKUs you have of a particular product across your entire inventory base. Hard to do that today. Easy to do that in the Boardwalk blockchain. Boardwalk also provides something called the Boardwalk Virtual Machines. And a Boardwalk Virtual Machine is effectively the user interface that a user would use to communicate with the digital ledger and the private permission blockchain environment that we would set up for you. The virtual machines can run in 3 different modes. You can run it as an Excel worksheet or workbook. You can run it as a web form, or you can run it in a mobile environment. And all 3 of those modes can interoperate with each other. So if you have heavy users that want to use spreadsheets and the value that a spreadsheet brings to data exchange and data understanding, great. You've got light users that want to use a mobile environment because they're only in the system maybe once a week, or they're on the road, or you've got people that actually would much rather use a web form environment. All 3 of them work, and all 3 of them can create and interoperate with each other. In a private permissioned blockchain environment, the other thing that also Gartner points out that's so important is that validation of these transactions is very important on the digital ledger. There's multiple ways in which you can validate these transactions. You can validate it through what's called proof of time. You can validate it through proof of work. You can algorithmically validate the information. Or in the case of a Bitcoin, they actually have third parties that validate the information on the blockchain via what's called a miner, who gets paid a little piece of a Bitcoin based upon the transaction value between the parties. In a private permissioned blockchain environment like you all are considering setting up and running, you will not have a miner involved because there is no Bitcoin to be able to pay the miner. And so you would want to be able to set up your own method around how do you validate that these transactions are actually appropriate. Again, there's multiple ways to do this: proof of time, proof of work, algorithmically. And we think that that needs to be set up on a use case by use case basis, depending upon what it is that you're trying to accomplish. The point is that the Boardwalk system allows you to set up any type of permissioning that you feel is appropriate, or that we would work with you on to set up for your particular use case. And of course, when you're running the hashing and the transaction IDs and the tying them to the previous transactions, all of these transactions are tamper-proof. And this is one of the keys to the digital ledger, is that if someone did get into the back-end system, tried to mess around with something that has already been established and generated on the digital ledger, everyone will see that that particular transaction, that there was an attempt to mess around with it. And this is what helps to create the secure storage and exchange of information. And this is part of the immutable transaction. And then the last thing is this whole workflow-based consensus. You know, workflow is an important part of this. And again, once you've got all of the data that's sitting on the digital ledger, you can now start to build, very robust workflows that not only help through a smart contract standpoint, but also allow you to be able to work with your trading partners and customers on different, workflows to improve the digital exchange of the information. So another area that is important with regard to the digital ledger has to do with connecting and aligning data. Can't tell you how many times I'll sit in a meeting with a large, Fortune 1000 company, and half the time is spent between the participants arguing, and I mean that kindly, but let's just say discussing how data was actually collected and arrived at. Well, how many times do we all go out and you have a meeting with 8 or 10 people and you're trying to figure out a forecast or do a plan for something, and you sit there and go, well, that's not the right data. Where'd you get that data? Well, I got that data from Oracle. Well, I got my data from Salesforce.com, or I got my data from this data warehouse, and my data is more up to date than your data, and you spend half the time trying to figure out whose data is correct. In a world of blockchain, one of the things that you can do is through integration, you can pull data into the blockchain from the various systems of record, not only aggregate that data on the blockchain, but you also have a history of where this information came from. So when we're bringing transactions into the digital ledger, it isn't just about, Sue or Joe making a change to a value in a spreadsheet and submitting that into the digital ledger through workflow or whatever. It's also just as much about logging and validating the transactions that are coming from back-end transactional systems so that you can go back in history and say, this inventory data came from Oracle, it came in on this date and at this time. And once you start to align the data, once you start to be able to collect this data from the back-end systems and have it in a central place as the digital ledger where everything is validated, now you can start to eliminate a lot of the discussions around where did the data come from, how do I know that it's correct, and now this isn't solving the problem that the inbound data might already be incorrect, but it does show you at least where it came from, how it got in, the date and time of when it came in. So we certainly see a lot of value around workflow, around smart contract, with the ability not only to connect and align data from within the enterprise or outside of the enterprise, but have it all come into the digital ledger with these transaction IDs so that you know where and how the data came in. So the way that the Boardwalk system works, before we get into the demo from JB, is this is an example. Now, the digital ledger, that is basically the major component or one of the major components of the Boardwalk blockchain system. That particular Boardwalk blockchain engine can sit anywhere that you want. You can put it behind your firewall so that you have complete control over your blockchain environment. It can run in the cloud, which we do, or it can run in a private cloud, whether that's managed by you or managed by us. Once we establish the blockchain, the Boardwalk blockchain server that incorporates basically a blockchain solution in a box, you then go ahead and you would build out, either with us, you would do it with your own internal IT people, or you would do it with one of our authorized partners. You would build out the data forms or the applications that would then be used for the movement of information between all of the participants and the digital ledger server itself. And this also would include the integration point that would be down as represented coming out of Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, or anything else. Once you establish what the workflow is going to be and what the data forms look like, then it's a matter of determining what is the appropriate user interface that would be used around the Boardwalk virtual machine to be able to have the users communicate into the digital ledger. We're showing 3 different examples here in the top right. This is an example of what a web form may look like that someone would open up and make changes to. And when they hit submit, the changes out of that web form would go into the Boardwalk digital ledger environment and get stored as a transaction. On the left-hand side here, you'll see a visual of what a iPhone would look like, so that a user could be using an iPhone to communicate to and from the digital ledger. And then up at the top left, you'll see a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is the most common UI to use today in kind of the Boardwalk blockchain environment. And what we do is we set up the spreadsheet, and most of the time we use the existing application or methodology that your folks have already set up for exchanging data. And what we eliminate is emailing. So you'll see at the top left-hand corner there's a submit refresh button. So everyone basically gets a template that is the Boardwalk virtual machine that takes about 2 minutes to load up. And that template then is sitting on their desktop, and they can then open it up and say, I would like to communicate with the digital ledger. And the way that they do that is if they make a change, they would make a change in normal Excel and then hit submit. And we kick off a secure digital ledger exchange between that information in the spreadsheet that is totally access controlled and the Boardwalk enterprise blockchain server. And when the information comes in, it gets stored onto the digital ledger. So we've got all of the validation rules that are running against that. And then if the person that is running the spreadsheet comes in the morning and says, oh, I'd like to see what's changed overnight, they simply can hit submit, or they can simply hit refresh. And what that does is that brings the information into the spreadsheet from the server to show them changes that have been made on the digital ledger. Those changes could be coming from other users. It could be coming from a mobile device, from a web form device. It could be coming from someone else on the that's running the application in a spreadsheet, or it could come from the back-end transactional systems where we've built integration. And the way that you know that a cell of data has changed since the last time you refreshed is there's a little red icon that shows up in the top right-hand corner with a pop-up that comes up that says this value has changed from 140,000 to 142,000. And this is the way effectively that the users now communicate with the digital ledger and exchange the information with all parties in this particular blockchain application. When someone decides that they actually want to go one level deeper and drill down into, show me what has changed at the cell level or the table level or column or row level, they literally can click on show me cell or row history. And at the bottom right, you'll see an example of a report that says the updated value is now 140, but previously it was 102. Before that it was 90, and before that it was 100, and it will show you when it was updated, the user, the date, the time, and any comments against the change. This is the digital ledger. This is what allows you to be able to see the historical reference to how information has changed over time between all of the participants as stored on the digital ledger. And this is the key to blockchain. Now you have history. Now you can see everything that has happened. Okay? So we're going to get into a demo very quickly here, but let me show you a couple of use cases. This is a use case for an apparel company. We talked about that a lot, but we have customers all over in all kinds of different industries as shown before. But this particular company is one that's very close to us. They have a multi-channel sales strategy, so they've got, their more brick and mortar stores online, they're Amazon, they're going through retail channels, so it's a complicated process. And then we looked at their system and we said, okay, where does it hurt? Where are you having pain? And they said, well, we're having a lot of pain in our seasonal planning. We're having a lot of pain in forecasting. We're having a lot of pain in store management and employee scheduling. We're having a lot of issues around sizing and PO generation or production commits. And so we said these are perfect applications to be moved over onto the Boardwalk blockchain. And so we basically, for this company, worked with them, and we built applications that are represented in green here to solve these problems. And the applications that are represented without green are applications that we're actually in the process of building out right now. So again, things like raw material planning or production cost hurdle rates, all the stuff that gets done outside of the core systems of record, all the stuff that is mission critical to a business, and all the stuff, quite frankly, that's run on a heck of a lot of spreadsheets within the enterprise. And guess what? It's okay. And the reason that it's okay is that it only takes about 6 weeks, start to finish on average, to build one of these applications on the Boardwalk blockchain. And if you can then start to knock off these various application areas where it hurts, where you could see tremendous value of improving the speed, improving the security, reducing your cycle time from 6 weeks to 2 weeks. Think of what that can do within your enterprise, and you can't do this by emailing spreadsheets around. You can't do this by going out and building applications from scratch or using some little vendor that's got some new cloud application. You want to do this on the blockchain because that will provide the security and the history and the ease of use of being able to deliver these applications. This is how you move to a digital world. This is the next step in the evolution. This is another use case for a CPG electronics company. Unfortunately, I can't tell you who they are, but they are massive and have won multiple awards from all kinds of different analysts as the #1 supply chain in the world. And as represented in green, these are applications that they are currently running and that we have built with them to run on the Boardwalk blockchain. So again, think of stuff like back orders, okay, or change requests or master planning. All of that stuff was being done in Microsoft Excel and emailed around. The minute that we moved them onto the Boardwalk blockchain system, magic happened and a tremendous amount of value was realized by getting all of this information into a central protocol known as blockchain and being able to have the history of all of the transactions and an easy way in which you can exchange digital information. JB, I think it's time for us to do the demo. I wanted to show you one other use case. This is from Coca-Cola, one of our long-term customers. We built for them a trade promotion optimization system that is currently in use. They're running about $8 billion worth of trade promotion through the Boardwalk system. And this has to do with hundreds and hundreds of people across not only Coke internally, across their bottlers, across their major customers like Safeway and the Krogers of the world, where you're trying to understand from a trade promotion standpoint, how much do I spend on a promotion for this week for Kroger for 12-pack of Coke? Do I get an end cap? Do I not get an end cap? All of that stuff. If you capture it on the Boardwalk digital ledger, now you can start to realize the real value of what really happened with that trade promotion system. How much value did I really get? Did my trading partner, Kroger, actually perform? Should they get that additional discount or trade promotion because they went over the 1 million unit mark? All of the stuff that's very complex to track can be easily tracked utilizing the Boardwalk blockchain system. So JB, let's go ahead and do a demo.
Yeah. So let's start off by explaining what you're looking at here, because this is very central to the discussion, is that in the Boardwalk world, the ledger is a grid of information that can originate from any system. It can originate from an existing environment that you might be using, for example, inside of Excel. It can be information that originates from your transactional system that says, I have a certain amount of information that talks about purchase orders or invoices with different amounts and completed dates and things like that. Or it can originate from transactional information that's coming in from your clients. The key point is that there's a lot of information involved in supply chain interactions. You need an environment that's able to take all this information, present it into a user environment that represents a business process, and then have the ability to manage this information over time. And this is what the Boardwalk digital ledger brings to blockchain, is the ability to work with positional information, which for business users, it's important to be able, for example, if this were a forecast and it said January, February, March, and then Q1, that means something to you as a business user, but in database lingo, that doesn't mean anything. So we use our solution to create the ledger, and the ledger exactly matches the data environment that people are working with and familiar with today, which is rows and columns of data representing business information. So in this example, we're showing contract manufacturers working in conjunction with this customer Acme Electronics, and we want to be able to initiate an exchange of information with these different contract manufacturers and have everybody work on the same shared digital ledger. Well, the way we're able to do that is we're able to say, take this data, associate it with the ledger, and then give everybody the ability to interact with it with their username, identifying the interaction with the ledger at any point of time. And very importantly, give you the ability to do access control against the data. Because in the case of this very simple use case, the Foxconn and Sanmina and Selectron people should not see each other's data. And the Boardwalk digital ledger environment uses a very simple and yet powerful capability that's very much like an access control or a auto filter, where you can say, hey, when these users for Foxconn and Sanmina are interacting with the ledger, only show them rows where their name shows up in the CM column. And if you think about this, this is a very powerful concept in that any one of the columns in the ledger can be used to control the interaction for what that person is able to see. So in this case, for example, if you wanted to have the Dell person interacting with the ledger, you could make it so they see their data, but they don't see any of the data from Cisco or IBM or anyone else. Each one of the users, as Andy talked about, can work inside of Excel, they can work inside of a browser, and as they're changing and making updates to information, they're using what we call submit and refresh. So let's jump over and take a look at what the individual from Foxconn would see. And when you first start working with the Boardwalk digital ledger, you're simply given either a blank login or you're given a Excel file. And when you log in, it says, okay, who is the particular user that I'm working with and what data should they see? So here you're seeing that this is Foxconn. And even though this is the same shared digital ledger, this user only sees 4 rows of data. They don't see anything else. And I can come in and I can say, well, you know what, I want to be able to make this completed. I'm going to make this be 9,000. I'll change this date and make this the 27th, and then say finalize and complete it. Now, one thing you might notice right away is, unlike other systems, you're able to interact with lots of different data at the same time. So you don't have to go in and lock records. You can do changes. You're able to leverage formulas. You can see here there's formulas that are being run. But when the user is ready and they say, okay, I want to share my change to the ledger, they click on submit. It says, who is this person? So there's an authentication that happens, and it can connect to Active Directory. It can connect to anything else in the enterprise for the verification of who the user is. And then it says, well, you know, what's the transaction comment that I want to be able to associate with this to say, this is my change. And I'll just say that this is an update for my particular changes. And right now this is displaying. I'm waiting for it to display. And as soon as this is done, assuming that I don't have an issue with my internet at the moment, well, let's why this is going on, let's go take a look at the browser. Because here's the other browser view. And instead of Excel, I'm going to go in and log in as Sanmina. And if you remember, Sanmina, when they're interacting with the data, they only are supposed to see their rows of data. So here's that same work order processing, but now I'm interacting with it as a Sanmina. And I'm going to come in and say, just change this and submit this and say my update. So this is now the user interacting inside of the browser to interact with the data. And then if I come back and I say, well, oh, so this is back, and I say my change, then this information will also be captured from the Excel environment. And then I'll have the changes come back inside of Excel. So if I come back over now and I say, show me what's going on inside of Excel, and for some reason my Excel is hanging up for a second, so let me, there it goes. So now what it's doing is it's looking at the information that's been changed inside of this Excel file. It only detects the net changes. And then it's also going back and it's saying, hey, I want to look at the state of the particular data. And in this case, I'm interested in the order state and saying for the rows that completed is equal to the order state, I want to be able to identify those as particular items that from a smart contract perspective have been completed. But then I also want to be able to generate the hash. So you're seeing here, based on these changes, the hash has been created and the update's been done. Now this is the Foxconn user. If I go back and I say, well, let's see what the Acme is, which is where I started, and I come back and I say refresh, then this person's going to see both the changes for the work that was done by Foxconn and also the changes that were done by Sanmina, right? So even though I have multiple users all interacting with the data separately, the ledger, every time somebody does a change, there's an insert in the ledger, the information is added, and then the hash is created to create the irrefutable version of this data to show what is the exact data as of any time. Now, as Andy indicated, you also have the ability to look at the WIP and see how data is processed over any data element. And you don't have to do any programming in order to have a history of all of the data, because inside the ledger, each one of the cells that's changed is updated automatically with only the cells that are changed. And if I go back now and I say, hey, let me look at the entire ledger here and see what the changes are, you can see here are all the updates that were done over time, who are the different users that did the updates, and then what exactly were the changes that were done by different users for, in this particular case, the updates by Foxconn or the updates by Sanmina. Now, the thing we'd like to be able to do is verify this from a transactional perspective with the blockchain. So if I go back and I say, let's take a look at the blockchain, and I log in as the Acme person, and I say, hey, let's take a look at the blockchain data. And I say, well, here's the data that's been pushed onto the blockchain, and here's this most recent transaction that I did. I want to be able to verify that this particular data is accurate as it's shown inside the blockchain. So when I go in and I say validate that row, I go in and I see everything's green saying that this thing's changed. Now, you would not be able to change this data in a normal workflow. When this is set to completed, for example, you can make it so that people are not able to make any changes to this. But for the sake of discussion, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this one and say, hey, let's submit this. And I'll say, change this to the database. And I've just taken this one value and I've changed it from what it was before to now to 7,500. And I'd like to be able to make sure that the changes that are represented in the ledger as of a specific time are irrefutable and have not been adjusted. So if I go back and I say, refresh this, and I look at the data that's inside, and now I come in and I say, well, let's validate this row and see what happens. Then when I look at it, it now shows it as red, because we're rerunning the hash and verifying that the data no longer matches what has been hashed as part of the transaction for the data over time. And this is one of the things, as Andy was talking about, that people spend a tremendous amount of time looking around, trying to understand who's changed what data, what did we all agree to, what exactly is the final version of the hash, and can I use this to either support a collaboration or to execute a smart contract to support payment for this particular item because it's been completed and it's been shipped back to Acme. So with that, we'll go through just a couple more slides, and then we'll look at some of the questions we have from folks.
Terrific. Thank you, JB. Great demo. I think one of the things that I want to get across to everybody is this, that the digital ledger and blockchain, as I stated earlier, is a protocol that allows you to be able to simply set up digital information exchange networks or environments that utilizes the digital ledger. JB is showing you a very sophisticated, is this hashed, is this not, did someone mess around with the transaction? There's going to be a lot of use cases where you don't necessarily need to have that level of validation, but yet the value that the digital ledger brings is really huge in automating a lot of these processes. So don't get too hung up on all of the validation rules and everything, because that will be driven on a use case by use case basis. The key here is automating and digitizing the information exchange utilizing this blockchain environment. So, why is it important to think about deploying a blockchain solution today? Well, again, the process efficiency can be really tremendous. We showed you a couple of different use cases where these, specifically in the supply chain, one for a CPG company, one for an apparel company, where they were able to realize great value in automating a lot of the existing spreadsheet processes that they have over onto the Boardwalk blockchain. And it's all about the process efficiency. How do you reduce things, planning? And frankly, a lot of what we do is planning. I mean, that's what it is, right? We're planning for inventory. We're planning for sales. We're planning for manufacturing. It's all the stuff that's done kind of offline and is complicated and has a lot of parties involved in it. So again, reducing manual effort is really important. Reducing the data errors. So again, not arguing about whose data is right because you've got it all there and it's validated. Eliminating the reconciliation issue and managing an exception process in a much more friendly environment, much better environment. And then, of course, the eliminating the separate smart contract execution and automating all of the different things around smart contract is really important. How do you take this digital ledger and automate even further beyond just the digital exchange of information, and how do you write code, simple code, by the way, against that to be able to improve? And then, the digital transformation. Look, we have a lot of people that call us and say, my CEO just went to an event or just had a meeting with a peer CEO, and we need to have a blockchain strategy. And I would say that if you want to have a blockchain strategy, Boardwalk should be your blockchain company. And the reason is that we can have you up and running on blockchain applications very rapidly in a private permissioned environment that you can control and you can really start to see value. And we want you to be able to say, not only to your peers, but also to your CEO, we're running blockchain, we love it, it's great, and Boardwalk is supreme. So let's move on to the next slide, JB.
I think that's the end.
Okay.
Let's answer some questions.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that I know that Laura had a little bit of trouble kind of getting onto this.
Yeah, and she has been emailing me like crazy, apologizing because she had an upgrade and the machine didn't work and everything else. So.
Okay, so if she can hear us and if she would like to, pop on, feel free to speak up.
Can't get her on the phone.
Okay, no problem.
Hey guys, this is Laura. How are you?
Oh, there
yeah,
she is.
Great.
Hey.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, so I got on about 4 minutes after the top of the hour, and appreciate you starting. When Microsoft upgrades, it just rips all the links. But, it's great to have Boardwalk Tech be so aggressive and moving on blockchain. One of the things that many people are doing is looking at blockchain as perhaps an integration system for enterprise apps. So maybe I can just join and we can answer the questions together. Sorry, I've been hanging out here listening and watching.
No problem.
No worries.
No problem. So the first question that came in was talking about, can Boardwalk satisfy the EU guidelines around personal data? So the answer is that the blockchain is a great way to be able to validate and securely manage that information. We have a lot of customers that are managing personal data on the Boardwalk blockchain and that currently meet the EU standards for managing that personal data.
Yeah, and also, you know, with all of the blockchain environments, the ledger is distributed and running across multiple users' environments. So you're able to control where the ledger is, especially if it's a controlling entity. So obviously that person would be inside the EU. And then you're also, this is a permission blockchain environment. So nobody's going to get on the blockchain that you don't know about, and therefore you would be able to control whether that person is in EU or not in terms of being able to get access to the data.
Right.
And then the multi-party one's very interesting.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
One of the questions is, you know, is the system multi-party in that if a user enters their data in a spreadsheet, does it get published to their supply chain partner environment? And I think this is, you know, an important aspect of the notion of this shared digital ledger is that, yes, it is a multi-party system, and that by definition is what a blockchain ledger is and also what the Boardwalk data environment is, that you can share this common grid of data, which is a ledger. You can have multiple people and systems interacting with it. As people make changes, and they're allowed to make changes, they submit their information. It goes to the shared ledger that everybody's working with. And then based on access control, the other users will see those changes automatically show up inside their individual environment, whether it be a spreadsheet or a browser, or if it's an integration out to SAP or any other environment. So all the changes are, you know, shared back and forth between, you know, multiple users as soon as somebody commits it to the ledger.
Right. So another question is how many suppliers and customers are, or many suppliers and customers are reluctant to share information. You know, kind of how do you overcome that? And I would say that first of all, you know, if you look at portals as the kind of, you know, the last decade of as an answer from SAP or Oracle to how do you get communication going with trading partners, they've effectively failed for the most part. And everybody has reverted back to emailing spreadsheets around. Managing the suppliers is hard, managing trading partners is hard, but with the Boardwalk blockchain, you're providing them with 3 different user interfaces, which eases the burden. We also set access control so that you're only showing them their data or allowing them to manage their data. And it's effectively, you know, you need to tell them that this is the most efficient way for them to communicate with you. And it's a sale job, right? You got to go in there and say, hey, this is what we're going to do from now on. But obviously the portals have it.
And Laura, I think, can you add to that as well? Because that's very close to the use case we talked about for network and networks, that if you have a business partner that doesn't want to share information, I mean, ultimately, if you do a reconciliation, for example, on pricing and contracts, I mean, they need to share that in the context of, you know, supporting the business. So,
well, I think blockchain helps you with those trust issues. You know, one of the things you've got to do is you've got to align on business goals to drive collaboration. You just can't share data. And we've never before been able to combine transactional and contract data in a secure way. So I think that the education of the multi-tier process about what blockchain can do as a starting point to be able to make sure that people understand just how secure this is and then the permissions of access. But when you start and you share data, you've really got to start and share data with a goal in mind. So is it deductions that you're trying to eliminate? Is it, you know, perhaps on-time delivery information that ties to deductions or trade promotions? So you got to start with the goal in mind and make sure that there's skin in the game for both parties so it's worth their time. People don't want to just share data for data. They really want to share data with a goal in mind, and they want to be sure that it is a secure send, and most people don't understand blockchain enough to really be able to have that discussion. So start with a goal in mind, educate, and then design the multi-tier process.
Yep. So everyone, we're just about out of time, but we did want to, and thank you, Laura, for that. We did want to tell you that Boardwalk is excited to be able to work with you. We're excited to be able to partner with Supply Chain Insights and Laura. And as part of our kind of give back to this session, if you engage with us to start your first blockchain application and your blockchain journey, Boardwalk will pay for a one-day innovation spark session for you and Laura to talk about where blockchain can be used throughout your enterprise. And so we just wanted to put that out there. We respect Laura so much, and you know, obviously this is an important webinar for us, and we very much would encourage you to contact us if you're interested in talking more about blockchain or taking us up on the one-day innovation spark session that we would be happy to pay for you with Laura.
And for those of you, we got a bunch of, I'm sorry, go ahead, Laura. Excuse me.
I just want to also say I appreciate Boardwalk Tech presenting and the Network of Networks recently, and they're also participating in some pilot work that we're doing in the Network of Networks, which you can follow on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in joining the Network of Networks to actually participate and to not have to exchange funds, because one of the premises of the Network of Networks is technologists and business leaders work together. You can join our calls, you can come to our events, and you can see it. We really want to redefine B2B processes, and we appreciate Boardwalk Tech supporting us as part of that. Thank you.
Okay, and then just as a closing note, for those of you that ask questions, we will answer all the questions afterwards. If you have any more, send a question into Regina, and she'll get those over to us or to Laura, and we'll make sure we follow up. And thank you, everybody, for your time. I apologize for being a few minutes over, but everybody have a great day.
Thank you.